bill for that exact purpose.
I think it's regardless, though. I mean, clearly we're live here. Clearly, regardless of our individual opinions, which I'm sure everyone has their own opinion, the way the financial world is looking at this election is it's done. It's over with. Biden's the president. People seem to feel
the financial world, all they're looking at is the Republicans are winning the Senate. And that's nothing is guaranteed in this election at all, including that, or the presidency. So that's all what the market's looking at is wishful thinking at the moment.
That to me is what makes the stock market so fascinating to one extent in situations like this, is because it feels like when you look at what the futures are doing today and the massive rally we had yesterday, it seems like the market is pricing in the fact that you can now kind of put risk back on, and we're heading for less volatile political times with a president that's not going to be all over Twitter. He's not going to throw out these unknown situations left and right that just cause all these swings. And I mean, Dad, you could talk more about what you were saying with the Senate this morning. I thought that was kind of already done with, and everyone was coming to terms with the fact that there's not a blue wave, it's split, so there's not going to be any real changes. And then you're going to have a new president that's, like I just said, a little more stable, if you will, as far as like the rest of the world looks at him. And it seems like, at least in the immediate term and what we're seeing on the surface and in the stocks markets right now, everyone's absolutely loving the results of this election.
Yeah, I mean, all the talk so far has been that it's split because the Senate went Republican, but the results in Georgia are interesting in that if you don't have 50% of the vote due to more than one candidate, then they have a runoff election in January. And right now, David Perdue, who's the incumbent Republican, has 50 on the nose. And there's more votes coming in from Georgia. So if he goes below 50, even though he's winning, they're going to have another election. And then the other candidate is Loeffler, who's also an incumbent. And she's in a multi-person race. So that will go into an automatic election also. So that's two right there. And they've already lost one. So one of those two have to be Republican for it to stay Republican. But it's crazy that this could mean another election result that everyone has to wait for.
Well, yeah, same with the presidential election. This might be like an Andrew Jackson situation with Trump, where he's actually in another election, technically. So we'll see how all this plays out, because from what I'm reading, this thing is far from over. So,
yeah, when you talk about the Georgia thing, is that something that, I mean, if it went the other way, that would mean that...
That would, I believe, mean that you're tied at 50-50. And then the vice president makes the final decision. So that means whoever the president is has the advantage.
Gotcha.
So that would mean that they have the Senate if that was the case. So a lot has to happen for that to be the case, but it's not a lock.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And
well, yeah, the amount of money they spent, they're in shock that they didn't even get this to begin with. They thought this was a shoo-in.
And then, yeah, I mean, this morning, look, just to recap yesterday, great rally. It never really slowed down, finished strong. A lot of stocks got good lifts. We talked about some of the laws that got passed that helped the gambling stocks. I think later on, the marijuana stocks started to rebound a little because I guess there's more states that pass not only medical but also recreational laws that favored those stocks. I mean, is there
ride sharing?
What'd you say?
And ride sharing, Uber and Lyft.
Uber and Lyft, which are giving a little bit of it back this morning, but not really. I saw Lyft sold off hard yesterday, but Uber, which is the stock that we own, had a nice look. So that's always good to see. And then today, I think, and I could be wrong here, but I think Zillow has their earnings after the bell.
I don't think that's today, is it?
Yeah, it is. Yep, November 5th. So that'll be a good one to follow. I'm already long Zillow, but I was looking at possibly adding a call option position at like 125 strike price, which
I
will
would
trade.
be careful on that one from what I was talking about yesterday with some people.
They're cheap. That's the whole point of doing it, is to basically take a small gamble on a big blowout for their earnings. If you're wrong, you lose a few $100. If you're right, you win thousands. So I'm not in it, but I was looking at it yesterday. I tried a similar thing with Activision last week, and it didn't work out. I never buy call options. It's not really my strategy.
That's the Goldfeld method. He'll be gung ho on a stock and go ham on buying calls, thinking a stock's going to pop going into earnings.
And he'll usually do both, where he's probably, I don't know what he's doing with Zillow. I know he loves them, but like I know in years past would own the stock and load up on call options.
Yeah, he's not in that mode today.
True. So yeah, that'll be an interesting story to follow. Obviously, that space is super hot. And if you really look at what we were talking about a couple of weeks ago, it seems like any company that reported a really good quarter last quarter, basically, not much really changes in a few months. So you look at Zillow, and for our viewers that don't remember, Zillow was up 20 to 25% after their earnings last quarter. And eventually their stock got all the way up to like either 112 or 115, ended up selling all the way back down to like a little under 90. Now,
yeah, we told our viewers when it was around 90 to jump on it, because it had fallen enough where it seemed like a reasonable. I got in Zillow at 89 a week ago.
Yeah, I mean, my whole point, though, is there seems to be a theme, and obviously it could change at any point, but companies that had really, really good earnings a quarter ago, where you saw their stock have huge movements, the same thing has been happening this quarter. You look at Pinterest, you look at Snapchat.
Yeah, but we know that could change in a dime with any company. There's no parallels with that in different industries.
And the reason I was thinking about doing the option play was I have Gene Munster's comments ringing in my ear from that Zoom hangout he did a couple of weeks ago where he was talking about Zillow earnings. And he was like, yeah, I could see their stock either selling off 5% or going up 25% off of their earnings. And I know he was just saying that off of the cusp, but still.
I mean, Zillow could easily go up to 125, 130 from those earnings. Who knows? I'm long Zillow, not a ton, but I'm glad I'm back in it. It's gone to a nice little run.
Yeah, and then Baba had their earnings, and I saw they had a profit beat but a revenue miss, which is surprising to see Baba have a revenue miss. Normally you'd think it was the other way around. And correct me if I'm wrong, it is the other way around, but I think that is what I read, is they fell short on revenues, which you don't really want to see that for a company.
I still love them. I bought them yesterday. I think at 295 levels, I was still tempted to jump in. And what's up, Big Cookie Ed Jarvis? How's it going, buddy?
It'll be interesting to see what happens with Baba today, because I feel like their stock was, it already sold off hard because of the Ant IPO, which who knows what's going to happen there. But diving more into the Ant IPO, I could see that not actually happening. Ant almost seems like China's way of rolling out, Square, PayPal type service, a service that tries to almost decentralize what the banks are doing. Like, Mike, what you're so big on. And at the last minute, China almost came out and just embarrassed Jack Ma. And, days before the IPO was going to happen, it was like, nope, this isn't happening. So, Baba, obviously, an investor in that.
Dan, that's a great point you bring up. That's exactly why cryptocurrency is going to take on a life of its own. When you're having a country dictating terms of an IPO in itself, you look at top-notch investors in the world, they see that, and they make note of that. And you're already seeing them starting to shift gears on how they even invest in startups. So that right there that's what part of why I guarantee you're seeing Bitcoin starting to act consistent.
Yeah, I also think, and Dad, maybe you know more about this, it's probably why people are always so afraid of China's stocks in general, is because they know at any point this type of thing could happen, where obviously anybody who is thinking about investing in Ant, you can't yet, so nothing really happened. But what could have obviously happened, and this hasn't happened to any stock I've owned or even since I've been in the markets, but Dad, you always warn us of the possibility of, you buy a stock like JD and China just decides, you know what, we're taking over this stock, and you wake up and the amount you own is just worthless. And that's just like not something you really worry about when you invest in a United States company, because there's all the regulations that protect you from that type of thing happening. So,
well, you have nothing to worry about that if Biden's in office, the way he hangs out with China. So
it doesn't matter. China's doing this for their own reasons, and it has nothing to do with the United States.
no, I get that, but more the whole politic game that we're in. That the next few years under that regime would be not a problem.
You could wake up any day and a company could be gone.
Yeah, exactly. That's why you should own some cryptocurrency.
That's why in Russia this happened quite often.
Yeah, the writing's on the wall. The people are going to take over the world as humans and not be run by governments. That's where we're heading, which is going to be phenomenal.
Dad, you doing any buying or selling today? I see General Motors had a good quarter, which they seem like they keep going up lately. And
look at Qualcomm.
What'd you say, Mike?
Qualcomm killing it.
Well, yeah, Qualcomm killing it, which is good for Apple. And, Apple had a dominant day yesterday. They're trading at 118 now. So, everyone always says, and again, Dad probably knows more about this, that if Qualcomm has good earnings, it's really because Apple, who's their biggest customer, is buying a lot of stuff from Qualcomm. And they're not necessarily allowed to say that in their earnings, who the customers are, because it's one of Apple's rules.
Everyone knows it. So,
yeah.
No, I mean, it's definitely a factor, but, the analysts know where the earnings are coming from. So I don't think that's a surprise. What's a surprise that it reacts that much? Like the surprise is, people forgot about it, but it was out there. It seems like no sellers are around, just like there were no buyers around last week.
So time to dump stuff then.
Probably.
I think I could see this rally heading strong for another few weeks into the end of the year.
Well, it might only be a few hours for now. And then, nothing goes straight up. And then this is getting a little overdone.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that the U.S. tech futures right now are back above 12,000 when literally 2 days ago they were at like 10,600. It can't really be healthy for the markets. Like the swings that are happening right now are unbelievable. I don't know if what's happened the last 24 hours is just kind of unwinding what shouldn't have happened leading up to that. And maybe this just turned into way less of an event than people anticipated.
I think there was a very big fear about a blue wave. That's what this was. More than anything, the whole, as we saw yesterday, miraculously, the virus count wasn't even discussed on any of the networks.
And
what a shocker.
And now it's bad. Now they should be discussing it.
Right, Dad. Well, we'll see how that narrative, it just shows, though, the narrative, that's the world we live in. And the market, that's what makes market stories. So,
look, the COVID narrative is still front and center. Like you look at Fundstrat, they came out with a report this morning, and that's the Thomas Lee guy that is always just like, stocks are going to the moon every single day. He's like Dave Portnoy in that sense, even though I'm sure there's times when he gets on the other side of things. But they released a report this morning saying that COVID cases in the United States are going parabolic and that like we're over 100,000 a day, and it's just like completely out of control now. And I also saw something this morning, and this seems like more of a thing that right now is nothing, but you never know. It could always turn into something. So apparently in Denmark, they found out that like one of their rodent species, that's like the main rodent species they have in Denmark, there's like millions of them. Business Insider released an article about this morning. They found a new strain of COVID in them that they said is like a different type of COVID that can completely basically invalidate any of the vaccines we're working on. They're going through and killing the entire species right now in Denmark, like millions of them. I forget the name of these things. They're like these little rodent animals. And apparently there's already been 10 cases with humans getting it from these rodents. And they think that by killing the entire species, they're going to put the whole thing to rest and it's not going to be a big deal. But they're saying, if this gets out and we aren't able to contain this, this could be what starts like a whole nother pandemic.
Well, maybe that's the end of humanity. It's been a good run.
But wait a minute, are you sure this wasn't a movie you were watching?
Yeah, no, his dad. This was because that's what I was thinking when I was reading it. This came from Business Insider. It was an article. Denmark says it will kill 17 million mink after discovering a mutated strain of COVID-19 that officials fear could restart the entire global pandemic. I was reading this and I was thinking to myself, like, is this a fake article? But Business Insider is as real as it gets, isn't it?
I mean, these days, who the hell knows? I wouldn't really, I'd put everything with a grain of salt, any article you're reading, because a lot of it's bullshit.
But that is what I was thinking when I was reading this. I was like, is this fake? But then I was thinking like Business Insiders, where I read a lot of very valid news. That's like tons of really legit news sources on Twitter will put up Business Insider type things. So I don't know. I'm not really thinking it's that big of a deal, but it kind of goes back to what that big viral specialist pandemic guy out of Minnesota was saying at the beginning with the deer. And that's when everyone was like, oh, this isn't going to be a big deal. He was like, just wait to see what happens if this gets into the animal species. And he's like, that's when you have this black swan event where everyone's like, oh, COVID's almost over. And it's like, no, COVID hasn't even started. I'm not at all saying that I think that's what's going to happen here, but it's just like everyone's like, oh, once the election's over, COVID narrative's going to die down. No, it's not.
There'll be a vaccine and or else the world's going to end. People can't mentally deal with this shutdown shit anymore. I'm personally over it. I was locked down for months. I'm not doing that shit again. No way. So if I'm forced to lock down, I'm leaving.
Denver numbers are up at 2,500 a day now. So.
Yep, time for a road trip. I'm getting out of here.
Oh yeah. And then as far as
what's the news on KXIN today? This thing's doubled.
KXIN?
Yeah.
I don't even know what that is.
Yeah, it's the big mover today, I think. One of them. Obviously, everything's moving. Apple's
Auto Holdings. KAIXN Auto Holdings. So they're in the auto space. Let's see. Ford has appointed Ming Jing Ling, founder of. This seems like a fading opportunity because there's no real news.
All right. I mean, it looks to me like this is one of those days it's going to be really difficult to buy anything, and that's probably the reason to take some profits. Because what do you look at to buy other than you can go back to the U.S. Steels of the world, which got hit.
I have to get back in X.
Well, yeah, I was going to even say Ford when I was bringing up General Motors this morning.
Yeah, Ford is up.
Got down to 765 yesterday. Or no, I'm sorry. Never mind. That's not that crazy. But Ford was one of the only stocks that was really selling off yesterday out of the stocks I own. And I was wondering if I should give it a look, but
there was definitely some rotation out of these names from the trade. Obviously, the traders are trying to find the next place to go into, and they were all in those cyclicals. And they quickly got out of them yesterday and went into the tech.
Well, the psychedelics that Dan and I brought up on the podcast yesterday, they acted great yesterday with that news that came out.
Yeah, I saw that.
So that's credibility for that sector like crazy when you think about it. When you start seeing legalities go around those things, I mean, those could really start popping off.
And those stocks also move higher when everyone is making money everywhere else, because then they say, yeah, let me buy that thing. It looks like.
Well, yeah, until it's a staple, which it will be soon in healthcare. That's what's interesting about those.
And Microsoft, Oppenheimer went bullish on Microsoft today. Microsoft's trading at
222. It's trading.
It just went down to 217.
No, you got a bad quote.
Okay.
222.
Yeah, so that stock is incredible. I mean, up 22 points in 2 days.
Microsoft, they've been making some great moves behind closed doors, and like we've talked about many times, any dips in stocks like that are times to jump in.
And listen, you can go on Twitter and see like what the common narrative is right now. And that's the only reason it makes me want to almost not sell anything yet. Because everyone is, it seems like, kind of on the side of like, oh, you got to short this rally.
I agree with you. I'm holding. I think this is more run.
Shorting this rally seems to be the most obvious thing, because it's like, okay, the market was starting to get chaotic, and now you have this like almost 48-hour parabolic move. And then you would think it's like, okay, what's really happened here? Not a whole lot. We're going to have to go back to dealing with all the realities of what's going on in the world, what's going on with the economy. And it wouldn't shock me if, you see a massive sell-off and then that's the narrative. It's like, oh, what, did everyone think that COVID just...
I don't think that's coming. You hear Mitch McConnell came out last night saying he thinks a stimulus deal has to get done now this year, now that he was reelected. I don't think that. I think this has way more room to run.
Yeah, well, that's where it's...
it may have a lot of room to run, but within that, you could take profits in a lot of names and find other names.
I keep taking profits and owing more money. Every time I take your advice on taking profits, I'm down cash. So if anything, you got to just keep building.
Well, I'll tell you what, last week, or maybe it was a week and a half ago, I was positioned a little offsides for that 2,000 point flush out that happened. And I feel like right now, seeing my account literally right back to where it was right before that is like a gift from somebody and this is where part of me is like, man, maybe you should.
Well, you know what? This is the time to look at call options as a strategy to make some sales. At least if the market drops 5 to 10%, you're going to be able to cover yourself to a certain extent with call options.
I think the only way that happens is if this election actually turns into like an unrest situation.
What I could see happening is David Perdue goes under 50%, and all of a sudden the narrative goes that the Senate Republicans had it to maybe they don't have it, and we have to wait for another election to find out. And the amount of money that'll be poured into those elections in Georgia will be unprecedented because it's so important for so many.
That better not happen, because I think that's going to lead to much more problems with the main presidential election with Trump. If they end up going under 50%, that's going to lead to a lot of unrest.
Well, Georgia, they haven't called yet for the president. So you have to figure the same.
Yeah, there was a pipe burst in Fulton County, ironically, when Trump was up huge. Very odd.
The point is that the same voting that President Trump gets, Perdue is usually getting. So they're going to go up and down together.
Yeah, it's been very interesting just how these states are just out to lunch. Nevada just kind of casually moving like a turtle, counting these votes.
What's been one of the most interesting things, though, is how we've randomly talked about the seasonality election chart every 4 years, and it has been to a T. And what that election chart shows is what's happening right now to continue for maybe another day, and then a huge flush out in November, followed by a December rally at the year's end. And that has been very, very accurate. It predicted exactly what was going to happen at the end of October, and it predicted what was going to happen at the beginning of October. It's been very, very accurate. The extremes to both sides have been a little bit more than you necessarily see on the chart, where when the chart shows rally, it maybe rallies a little bit more, and when the chart shows down, it maybe goes down a little bit more. But based on that chart, you maybe could see this continue for a little, but then it wouldn't shock me if you see us go even lower than we were at last week. And that kind of goes back to what I was saying, is that it's tough to, if you were caught off sides last week and now you're right back to where you were, you want to at least make sure you're positioned in a way where you could be in a good spot if the market does go to all-time lows. Because there's people out there that think that, 2,000 or even 1,800 are completely in play in the foreseeable future for the S&P. And these are people that have been very accurate with their predictions throughout the year. And their reasoning does make sense. So those things are in the back of my mind, and you don't want to be caught, off sides if a move like that happens, because it can just set you back for years.
Yeah, I don't see any of that happening. I think there's way too much protection with the Fed and what's coming with the stimulus. If anything, COVID will prevent that from even being possible. I don't really economically see how that can even happen.
And that's why it could happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Right before the election, this girl I follow on Twitter, who's got a ton of followers and as big as in the investing community, she'll put up these polls, and it's obvious it's for her to get a common theme from what people are thinking, so she can kind of take the opposite trade. And she put up a poll saying, how many of you think that the market can correct 10% before the election, which is what happened last week? She put this poll up like 3 weeks ago. And it was like, people were like, you are out of your mind. There's zero chance that happens. And then because of that, she positioned for the short and absolutely crushed it.
I mean, no one has any clue. Everyone's an expert. Humans are clueless about everything.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. But the one thing, Dad's always told us this, and we continue to see it time and time again, anytime everything is very easy or the narrative is beyond one-sided, you could almost guarantee go the other side, and it's a matter of days before you're going to be correct.
The best narrative is do your own homework and go off intuition and your lens and figure out who you believe in and who you don't, because most people are full of shit.
It sounds like a good debate.
Bob, what are you doing today in the market?
I'm looking for options to sell against positions. I'm thinking right now Microsoft 230s, maybe for December.
Wow.
Yeah, an interesting one. And Apple 125s for December. As far as other names, like if you look at DKNG, which has gotten absolutely shot, we've seen, we talked about it almost every day. When you look at the chart, just look back at like a 30-day chart, it looks like it's hardly moved up, which is to me a good sign. That means that there's probably more room to go. I look at the chart, I see 45 before I'd be concerned. So I'm thinking of maybe selling the 45 calls for December.
Yeah, the other thing to think about with DraftKings is that's the type of stock where you'll probably naturally see it trade up into earnings, which is on the 12th. So you got a week till earnings. And yesterday, in addition to the law that got passed that helped Penn out, there were several new states that legalized gambling. So, Penn with their Barstool Sportsbook app, but also DraftKings. I think after the election, they're able to go into 4 new states. I don't know if that's better or worse than people were thinking, their roadmap would be. But, yeah, it seems like things could only get better from here for DraftKings. I don't know.
And Fastly is another one which came down off of the earnings. We talked about it 100 times. It actually was down 50% from the high. That easily can get back to about 85, and then I'd look to either sell options or get out completely.
That's a stock I bought more of 2 days ago. What about Twilio, Dad?
Yeah, it's probably a similar chart.
Because this is like basically my biggest holding now, and it's just been
a much better chart. Right now 314.90. It's going to test the highs again. It feels like to me. But at any time it could sell off and get back to 295ish. That would be the entry point.
Yeah, it's tough to. It's tough right now because you look at it and like you said, you're like, okay, was that just a dip? And now we're going to rip to all-time highs. And then you look at like 350 to even 400 for a stock like Twilio. Or is this just all a fake out? And, what people were saying a week and a half ago. And that's, again, where I keep thinking guys like Muhammad Al-Arian who are very smart. And what they were probably thinking is, no, we're not buying tech yet. Tech needs to come down yet another 35%, and then it will start to make sense. And
so you never get the chance, though, to buy it where you want. That's the other
side. And then I also wonder if a guy like that is actually buying stock behind the scenes.
Yeah, that's why I don't pay attention to any of these people. They have their own agendas. They don't care about any of us.
Amazon's interesting because Bezos sold $3 billion worth of stock last week. Usually you read that and, oh, my God, I better get out. The stock's up another $80 today.
Yeah, look, I think I'm on that Guru Focus platform when it shows when CEOs or anybody within a company buys or sells their stock. And what I've realized is it means nothing because these people, like someone like Jeff Bezos, who might be spending $120 million a year to maintain his lifestyle, that money, he's got to sell some stock to pay off those houses. And,
so he sold $3 billion to keep his lifestyle going. But the point is, though, that the stock is his bank.
Exactly. So, that's why it's like that doesn't mean Bezos is like, oh man, the good days are behind us. He's probably looking at it like, I need some cash. You know, he probably pays himself a modest salary and makes.
Or he might be starting another company. You know, who knows what he's doing?
Yeah, or investing into like space travel or vaccines.
I actually think he was selling because of future capital gain considerations, but who knows? I mean, there's no way to know what his reasoning.
Yeah, that guy's gonna owe a fat tax bill. We'll see if he pays it.
Yeah, I don't know, but
that's it, guys. Rolland Market Mashup, YouTube, hit subscribe, and yeah, today should be another interesting day in the markets.